Thank you very much for opening this session, and thanks to Jorgo to give us some insights in what's happening in Brussels, and that's certainly where the heartbeat is beating for the hydrogen economy of the future. I'm very happy to have my panelists with me just come on stage to answer the most decisive question that we are asking ourselves. How can we accelerate Europeans' hydrogen economy and, of course, replace with this fossil fuels such as oil and oil and natural gas? We heard from Jorgo that we certainly have an intellectual advantage here in Europe, and if I look into the audience, I certainly can confirm this. The advantage that we have is that we have the brains, that we have the experts working on hydrogen every day, and this certainly sets us apart from other economies where this kind of intellectual breadth and depth is not yet existent. And now it's about the regulation, about economic forces to bring this to life. Before we start with the panelists, and as this should be a rather interactive discussion, also including you, I would like to start with the first poll to give you the chance to give us an opinion and to set the stage for the first question that I want to discuss with my panelists. Before we look ahead into the perspectives, let's look a little bit back. What have we achieved so far? Are we in a good shape here in Europe, developing a hydrogen economy? For me personally, it's the second hype of hydrogen, and it feels completely different than the first one, which I experienced in the automotive industry, where we were focusing on single cars, making them climate neutral. Now we're talking about a global development, about a sector coupling development, and of course a much more systematic approach. So I think we have a pretty good starting point, but when I look at your feedback, and 80 already have participated in the poll, we have achieved something, so no one has voted for nothing. That's good, and I think that's something where the panelists certainly will concur with me. But we haven't achieved a lot so far. That's also something that we should take away from this first poll. So, starting with our panelists, okay. Now it's getting difficult. We want to discuss this question with our four panelists, which I have with me. And I want to start with someone who has been introduced by Jorgo as one of the masters of the hydrogen economy, Nils Aldag. He's the CEO of Sunfire. He's the co-founder of this very renowned company, leading basically the path in Germany in the areas of fuel cells and electrolysis. Nils, what's your opinion on what we have achieved so far, and what have you achieved so far? That might be also an interesting question that is interesting for the audience.
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having me here on this panel. I am surprised that it's saying moderately, because I think I would have said quite a bit, maybe not a lot, but definitely quite a bit. And I think as an electrolyzer manufacturer, I have still a lot of wishes and things that I would want to see optimized. But I would definitely say that we have achieved a lot, also in comparison to other regions in the world. And I always cluster it in the following way. On the one hand side, starting on the back, you have the off-takers, the demand side. And if I compare the level of awareness of the customers we speak to in Europe, one of them is here on stage, I'm always amazed how deep the understanding is of how hydrogen can be used, how far customers are in their thoughts of how to install equipment, how the layout will look like, where the power will come from, how we will make sure, most importantly, that the power is green. Although I think the Delegated Act is not optimal, I think it's extremely important to have a solid demonstration that we're using green electricity, otherwise we're not credible. So on the demand side, I think the level of understanding is extremely high, and that is a massive advantage for Europe. For example, in comparison to the US, everyone is talking about the great Inflation Reduction Act, but I think it should not be underestimated how important it is to face off-takers who have a very deep understanding of the topic, where you don't have to start explaining to people that hydrogen can be used in industry to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors, but where you're actually talking about real commercial things. Then on the supply side, that's the second pillar, if you want, in at least in my mental structure. On the supply side, I think Europe still has some of the most sophisticated suppliers of equipment who are taking some of the biggest risks on this planet in terms of investments into production capacity, investments into building up workforces, investing into becoming industrial players. Just for my company, we want to be able to produce something in the range of 750 megawatt per year by the end of this year. We already have a fully automated galvanization line for our alkaline production that can do hundreds of megawatt per year. We are with, I think, 600 people, one of the biggest teams in this industry. So on the production side, and we also here have not only one, but two companies, and there are many more. I think we're still in a relatively good position. And then comes the middle block, and the middle block is made up of a couple of things. That's mostly the rules that we have to follow in order to make this happen. That's the support mechanisms that green technologies need in the beginning in order to bring down the costs of the products, like with wind, like with solar in the past. And here, I think, again, we have achieved at least quite a bit. The problem is we're stuck at 85-90% across a set of, in principle, relatively interesting tools. Hydrogen Bank is one. Someone was asking, where does the Repower EU stand? Repower EU is there. There are quotas for industry. 42% is what Jorgo mentioned. There is a target for the transportation sector. There's the Hydrogen Bank and H2 Global that Axel can certainly speak about in more detail than I can. So there is a wide set of support mechanisms. There is a clearer understanding of how the regulation has to look like in order to make this happen. But that's still, I think, the biggest open point in order to get hundreds of megawatts and then gigawatts of final investment decisions that still has to deal a lot with, or to do a lot with the middle pillar that I just described. But I'm optimistic, and I think we've achieved a lot.
Achieving requires a workforce. You mentioned it briefly. You're running a company that's growing quickly. What is your perspective on the European workforce, on particular also recruiting specialists for hydrogen projects?
I'll try to make this not too long, but I think we're fortunate to be in Germany, first of all, with an extremely strong mechanical engineering sector, with still a relatively strong plant engineering sector. So, and I'm certain that if you would compare our electrical engineering capabilities to other regions in the world, we also don't have to hide. So I would say I'm very glad that our company is based in Germany, and even better in Eastern Germany, which I think is the best place in Europe at the moment to develop those kind of topics. But it is a massive challenge. And I always warn the demand side that we're going to see massive supply shortages, because the workforce to produce this equipment, the workforce to install the equipment and to take it into operation will be rare, especially in the first part of this industry growth. So I think people is, next to politics, probably 1A, 1B on the, or should be on 1A, 1B on the agenda of things we focus on.
Anna, you're the managing director of EDP Renewables. You're one of these engineers that Nils has talked about. You have a PhD in electrical engineering. You have a vast experience in not only technical but also regulatory aspects. What is, from your perspective, the view on what have we achieved so far? And looking at your intro statement, you're obviously sharing the perception that this time it feels different in terms of hydrogen hype.
Sure. First of all, good morning, everyone. And just a slight correction of what you just said. So I'm managing director of the hydrogen business unit within EDP Renewables. EDP Renewables is the fourth largest wind developer globally. I'm just in charge of the hydrogen business unit within that company. And going directly to your question, actually, I don't share such an optimistic view. Of course, I understand and I fully agree that we have come a long ways in the last couple of years. But I'm not as optimistic as you are on the different fronts that you described. And actually taking and building upon the structure that you were just describing, the demand, the supply, and what's in the middle. So the way, my understanding and my experience so far on the different aspects, so on the demand side, of course, as I said, we've come the long ways in understanding the opportunity, understanding what hydrogen can do for us on the decarbonization journey. But the reality on the ground is that there's still a lot of misinformation. There's still a lot of discussions that are informed by literature review and by textbook numbers that don't really represent the reality on the ground. And so my experience dealing with potential off-takers is that their expectations when it comes to the competitiveness or the readiness of the technology is not coherent with the reality. They are informed by discussions that don't have, ground support. On the supply side, of course, we have here two representations of very solid companies on the supply side, but we are also experienced a lot of challenge on the supply side and dealing with different OEM and different technology providers. The reality is that the entire industry is in its infancy. And we are facing challenges on, contractual arrangements, being able to actually deliver on the technical parameters, on schedules. So it's still a lot of, startup type of environment. So a lot of challenges in providing the guarantees that we need to make final investment decisions. And then in the middle, like you were describing, so in the middle, of course, we have all the logistics, the transport and distribution that is not in place, but I don't see that as an impediment to the development of the hydrogen economy, because I really believe there's a lot of opportunity to develop the economy locally and in a decentralized form. But the regulation and the policy aspects are taking way longer than expected to provide the investors like ourselves the clarity that is needed. Especially not just on the regulatory framework and the different policies that I think that's evolving, but on the financial aspects. So really understanding the instruments that are needed to close the funding gap that's taking much longer, not just at the European level, but at different national member states and in other regions as well.
But to start off, round off your intro, the challenges, I think, are clear, and we will elaborate on that a little bit. But just give us an insight in what EDP has done so far. What have you achieved so far? Where do you stand right now, from your perspective?
So, as a renewable developer, so I'm actually as a renewable hydrogen developer, we are developing projects mainly here in Europe, in North America, and in South America, especially in Brazil. We already have one operating project in Brazil since the end of last year, and we have another one under construction in Portugal. Apart from that, we have secured, public funding for 8 projects in Europe. But like I said, although we have secured public funding, we have not made final investment decision in any of them. We have 3 IPCEI projects, 100+ megawatt projects. But again, we have not yet made final investment decisions because there's still a lot of pieces in the puzzle that are missing. We have a target, we have announced a target to the market of 1.5 gigawatts of electrolyzers by 2030. So we're building the pipeline and creating the growth options to deliver upon that. Perfect.
Filip Smeets, you're the CCO of Nel, a company, Nel Hydrogen, which is focusing also particularly on the automotive market. Where does this particular sector stand right now? What have you as Nel achieved so far?
Well, maybe I need to take myself and the rest of the audience a little bit back in time, because I joined this sector in 2011, and I actually was going to start the 1st of April with the company Hydrogenics, also an OEM in this emerging sector. And I specifically asked not to start on April the 1st, but on April the 2nd, because I didn't want this to be an April joke. Luckily, I did that because it has been quite a roller coaster over those 10 plus years in the meantime. But back then, we were talking about kilowatt scale. And in the meantime, I know the first year my dream was to install a 1 megawatt electrolyzer somewhere in Europe. In the meantime, we moved towards several multiple megawatts. What is common at the moment is orders between 20 and 200 megawatt. And the gigawatt orders are not that far away. So if you look at that in only 13, 14 years, it's a lot of progress that has been made. But of course, we always want more. But that's also a danger, I think. Sometimes I think, aren't we moving forward a bit too fast? And I think it's definitely from point of view of technology maturity and supply chain development, it will be difficult to achieve the European and North American milestones, targets that the policymakers have set, because I think it's probably not realistic, but it's a very good aspirational target. Now, I think we also need to realize that this is not a pure technology play. This is an infrastructure play. And that means that this sector will not move forward if the policy makers are not supporting it. And that support, I would say, has only come about over the past 2, 3, 4 years in a more significant way and got into an acceleration due to the geopolitical tensions that we experience now, and that really drives policymakers to put the foot down and go into a different gear. And that, I think, is very important for our sector. Otherwise, I think progress would have been less important than what we currently see. Now, with regard to the OEMs and Nel in particular, I think we have made a lot of progress over the past years, but as Anna indicated, we need to also realize that a lot still needs to happen. Our sector, also from technology maturity level, is still quite immature. We need to scale up our technology, we need to scale up manufacturing, and we need to scale up the supply chain. And then there are also a bunch of other things, because when you build a large-scale facility, whether it's 100, 200, etc. megawatt, it's not only the OEM that needs to be ready and prepared, but there are also a lot of co-suppliers, not the least the EPC companies, that need to get matured on this new technology, on this new sector, and develop in terms of which risk they want to pick up in the development of those projects.
As a supplier to the basically the automotive industry or their customers, you're dependent on the strategies of OEMs. You mentioned that. Two questions and on this note. First one is what we see on the Slido, which is the German automotive industry is focusing on e-mobility, where other main players have a clear H2 strategy and roadmap. How do you see this development? And linked to this, I want to ask you about your company's involvement with projects in the US, in particular with GM.
The joint development agreement that we have signed with General Motors, I think dates back from November or something of last year, but it didn't came about overnight. We have a long-standing relationship and collaboration with General Motors in the US, where for about the last decade we have been partners in various development projects for the DOE. And then at a certain time, I think about 2-3 years ago, the light went on, and GM realized that, and we realized that they have a very extensive IP portfolio on low temperature PEM fuel cell technology. And we have a very extensive portfolio, IP portfolio on PEM cell stacks for electrolysis. So the obvious next opportunity was smiling in our face. Why don't we share forces, put all of that together, and move forward faster on the development of a new type of PEM cell stack, where the focus is on low cost, high efficiency, and high speed automated production of those cell stacks. That was the idea, and that's more than 2 years ago. So it took a while before we finalized the contract to move into the joint development agreement, but that is now in full swing, and hopefully that will deliver something exciting to move forward within 2-3 years from now.
And your view on the German OEMs, which was explicitly asked here?
Sorry?
The German OEMs, their strategy. That was
maybe it's probably better for Nils to answer that.
Okay.
No, but I think that's probably a distraction when it comes to really the areas where hydrogen makes most sense in the near term. I don't want to judge about the longer perspective. There are 1 or 2 automotive suppliers in Germany that are focusing on hydrogen. That's fine, that's great. But I think the really interesting business cases in the short term, they lie in refineries. They are with ammonia production, and hopefully also soon with steel production, with some of the first big projects in Germany, Salzgitter and ThyssenKrupp, who are receiving massive amounts of funding, 1 billion for Salzgitter, 2 billion for ThyssenKrupp. I think that's the cases to start with. I'm a strong believer of the hard-to-abate sectors and think that's where we should focus on first.
Let's come to Axel Wietfeld. He is now the CEO of Uniper Hydrogen, subsidiary of Germany's largest gas trading company. And in this company, you have had many capacities, have seen the business from different angles, including dealing internationally, LNG, storages, and so on. So you have mastered the whole value chain so far. Well, what is coming out of this business perspective? What have we achieved so far when we compare the maturity of the existing natural gas business with the current state of play in the hydrogen business?
Yeah, of course, you're comparing a business that has been established for decades to a quite new business. To stick to our opinion poll, I believe we have achieved quite a bit. Actually, our strategy is based on various pillars, an asset play, but also an origination and supply play. And the asset business is that what we are discussing right now. And there we have developed several projects, and I think we can be quite proud of that, similar to other companies. We believe in a healthy balance, and that's why we are currently following and close to FID projects in the 30, 40, 50 megawatt scale. So the first one to be announced is probably the one in Bad Lauchstädt in eastern Germany, where we combine the electrolyzer with a wind farm, but also with underground storage, with transportation, and we hooked it up with a customer, and we are cooperating there with Sunfire. And what we have achieved is to understand how complex such a mechanism is. I mean, compared to the traditional business, the capex is not immense, right? But nevertheless, it's really complex stuff. You need, of course, the permits for it. You need not only the nucleus might be the electrolyzer, but you need the entire surrounding. You need the balance of plant. You also need a power purchase agreement, an agreement with the customer, the transportation bit, and yes, some certainty and regulation would also be nice. So regardless of the size of the projects, actually it's a very high complexity, and perhaps we were all in the industry a bit naive 3 years ago, how quickly we could manage this complexity and how quickly regulation could kick in. So I fully agree. Our ambitions were probably bolder 3 years ago. So I looked at some of our business plan we had some years ago, and yes, there was already, we would already operate first facilities, but nevertheless, I think we can be proud of.
But things are moving. Things are moving.
Things are moving. Other examples are similar project in Sweden, and to give some German example, we are developing then the next scale in Wilhelmshaven, where we're looking into several hundred megawatt, up to 1 gigawatt play for an electrolyzer, and in addition, we would like to develop an ammonia import terminal for Wilhelmshaven, because we believe that ammonia is probably the transport vector that makes most sense, and that also forms a link to our trading and supply business, which you were mentioning, because as we all know, importing hydrogen or derivatives will be of utmost importance. We will not have the renewables in Germany to produce all the hydrogen ourselves. And that's why we are also developing this global origination business, similar to the LNG business, to orchestrate and also optimize hydrogen flows in future. We believe there is a lot of value pool in this kind of business, so we have managed several MOUs globally to do that. But again, no final investment decisions globally, because, there are no final investment decisions globally so far. So therefore, I think a good balance. We have achieved quite a bit, and yes, of course, there's a lot of, we have to roll up our sleeves also in future, there's no doubt.
So if you compare the maturity of the two supply routes, the international supply chains that are being built up, and the domestic developments that we see emerging, do they have equal maturity, or will we see imports first, or rather domestic production first? What's your assessment here?
I will believe we will see domestic production first. There are some, we have to call it island solution, right? There will be some production valleys for the moment, which is a fantastic start. And then somehow we have to roll it out and connect the dots and create also a network which requires infrastructure, such as proper pipeline business and also gas storage. For example, we are also testing the integrity of a salt cavern in Krummhörn with pure hydrogen. So that's some of the next bits to come. And then slowly and steadily also the international business and the imports will kick in. So that will have to be in parallel. But I think the first production will happen in Germany.
One last question. International supply will be supported by regulatory actions such as H2 Global, where you are active as well. And now we heard about the Hydrogen Bank, which obviously takes quite a bit of inspiration from H2 Global. Do you think these are good developments for Europe and Germany in particular?
So I think the funding scheme of H2 Global is a success. So the German government someone injected some 900 million euros in the first place for H2 Global, and we started the first auctions already last year. So that's not announcement, that's actually work and job done. So we received the first bids for supply, and the next phase would be that we would also ask for sales auctions, and then we will match these two and use the funding. In addition, the Dutch government has confirmed to inject some money, and now latest development, and that's a fantastic success, I think, for H2 Global and also for us as a German hydrogen industry, to Europeanize it and to use H2 Global now on the European level for these international legs. So import hydrogen from outside Europe into Europe. So that's really a good development, that we also see hydrogen now from a European perspective and not only from a national perspective. And we are very proud that H2 Global can play a substantial role in that one.
Nils.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to comment a little bit or try and fight for the idea that actually quite a lot was achieved. And I think to a certain degree, to be fair, it's probably the perspectives from which we're looking at this, because obviously from your company's perspective, being in an established market, what happens still looks relatively small. I think having been in this industry since 2010, 2011, already feels quite big. But I think what's important is that the nature of the discussions has completely changed. Yeah? We're not talking about the 1 megawatt demo projects anymore and R&D funding from the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking, which is not so long ago, and at least it feels like it was not so long ago from my perspective. But what we're doing now is we're having dead serious negotiations on hundreds or even thousands of pages of contracts on liquidated damages, on guarantees, on proving the maturity of your production capacities, on quality and supply chain checks that 3 years ago, 4 years ago, no one in this industry had ever experienced, to be quite honest. So I think for a very few in this industry, I always laugh a bit when I see the 40, 50, 60 supplier lists that some of the big consultancies are showing, but I would say for a handful of suppliers, this is now the reality. And we're negotiating 150 million euro credit lines with commercial banks, and again, not with the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking. So I think on the supplier side, the level of, or between the supply and the demand side, the level of discussions has changed. And the moment the middle bit, the business cases come into place, because the support for that comes into place, either through a renewable energy directive, which could generate 9 to 12 euro per kilogram of willingness to pay in refineries in Germany, or be it H2 Global Hydrogen Bank, which could generate, I don't know, 3, 4 euro per kilogram. I think the moment that comes into place, the few mature players and the industrial parties that have prepared their projects will suddenly start to see an exponential growth. The only thing I always want, last comment, the supply side, everyone in the supply side, the people who provide our components, the few good suppliers that are there, they will get under massive stress.
So you paint the picture that the industry is moving into the starting grid and that everyone is waiting for the final signal to start, which is basically also the question that someone has asked, what is needed to get towards the final investment decision. That's, I think, for all projects, the key starting point. And Anna, you have mentioned that you have many projects in the pipeline which require FID. So what is your view on, particularly also in the international perspective, where is the best environment right now to take FID, and what is needed, particularly in Europe, to create an environment that FIDs are taken?
Well, I believe that what's needed, it's the same everywhere. It's just clarity on the business case. For us, as investors and developers of renewable hydrogen projects, production projects, so we still lack clarity on the business model. So, of course, we can have a better understanding of the cost structure that I think we can master. I mean, being a renewable developer, we know exactly the cost of sourcing our projects through a combination of wind and solar, onshore, offshore wind and solar, and grid-connected electricity. We can also have a good understanding of the investment costs for electrolyzers, for the BOP, the EPC, the entire balance of plants and the investments. But then the willingness to pay is not there yet to make the business case a viable one.
So FID usually requires a customer, requires permits and a bank. Where do you see the biggest deficits right now?
Well, I don't think that what's lacking is not any of those that you described. What's lacking, it's what puts everything together, which is the business case. So there's willingness, I mean, there's appetite to consume hydrogen. But then the willingness to pay is not enough. Otherwise, if there was, if we had willingness to pay to close the cost to produce renewable hydrogen, we already had a hydrogen market, and we don't. We don't because it's not competitive against the alternatives. In pretty much all the applications that you can foresee. And so to close that funding gap, I mean, it's like talking about renewables 20 or 30 years ago. I mean, there's the recognition that there's a role to play, so we need to incentivize, we need to promote the development of that market, so we need to create the right incentives, the right price signals and the right incentives for the economy to kickstart. And so I'm talking about the funding instruments, but also on the regulatory side of things, there's still a lot of uncertainty. When we talk about Europe in particular, for example, we just saw Gorgo talking about the Delegated Act. We still lack a final visibility, understanding of exactly how to set up the projects and how to size the renewables when it comes to really achieving the renewable hydrogen definition. We also lack, for example, understanding of exactly the grid charges for electrolyzers. In many countries, in many power markets, we don't really know exactly what are the grid charges that will apply to electrolyzers. So there are many, many uncertainties that we still need to clarify to complete the business.
What is the invisible hand that puts everything together?
That's a good question. That's a good. My point would be it's us, right? I mean, it's all correct, and that's the reason why most of us haven't FID'd our projects yet. Nevertheless, my point is it also needs our desire and determination to take some calculated risks, and probably it will not be likely that at the same point in time we have this jigsaw, we have it all together, yeah? So we would have to work also with some risk, and that's probably easier for a mid-scale project than a multi-gigawatt scale project, which somehow would jeopardize then our balance sheet. So therefore, welcome to reality. We probably have to get used also then to take FID under some uncertainty. And I'm not neglecting what you have said. I mean, there's still also politicians and policymakers' responsibility to give us more certainty, but full certainty is probably unlikely.
Filip, for your business, where is the business environment best? So we heard from Jorgo this morning, there's an intensive international competition, the US, Europe, Korea, Japan. Where do you prefer to invest? And where do you think we will see the first FIDs?
Definitely in the EU and in Northern America. That's clear. I think a lot of the future or a lot of markets out there in countries where they have an enormous factor advantage to be able to deliver low-cost green power for making green hydrogen are not ready, and I think they will only become a factor in 5 to 10 years from now. So I think currently it's definitely in Europe and Northern America where our focus is to close contracts near term, and that's actually also what is happening. We see here companies that are willing and able, because they have a good balance sheet, to take risk. We are also seeing very ambitious new project developers that enter this market and want to be an early mover, and those are the companies with whom we try to form a partnership together with the EPCs in the pack, because somehow to get to a contract there needs to be a split, a share of the risk of the project, and it cannot only be taken up by the OEM. It needs to be shared with the EPC and the project developer, the customer. So that's definitely our focus is on Europe and Northern America.
Thank you. Looking at the many questions that you're asking, it will be very difficult to cover them all, but Nils, do me a favor. We have 2 questions on top which are top voted by you. What's your view on these 2 very pressing and urging questions? How do we deal with sector coupling between windmills and storage capacity? You're in a project, and Yes, here in Germany, of course, we have an intensive debate on hydrogen in the heating and building sector. Maybe, Axel, you can also share some views on that.
Yeah, look, so I think the most urgent thing we need to do is we need to get started, because I do agree with you, Anna, if you just take the bottom line, at the moment we're near zero in terms of installed capacity of electrolyzers and in terms of green hydrogen production. That's fully right. So we have to, and I believe the exponential growth curve is relatively near, but we need to focus on the things that really make sense in the short term, where you are not caught up in ridiculous political debates, to be honest, that are hindering us from doing what's necessary, which is to get going. I take out the word I was going to put in the middle. So on the heating and building sector, while I'm not sure whether we'll be able to do everything with heat pumps, from an electrolyzer company's perspective, I don't care. Why? Because there are opportunities that are so substantially bigger, or that are so big that could be captured in the early phase, that I think we should focus on those ones, have a bit more openness on how we decide or define what we do in every energy sector, because nobody frankly knows exactly whether everything can be done with one technology, or we might need one or two others in the mid to long term. So on the second question, I think this should not be our focus. Let's go towards the cases that make sense: refineries, ammonia, steel. And on the necessity of storing excess capacity, that's super important. That's going to be a support to bring down the electricity costs. That's the biggest advantage of hydrogen. I love the fact actually that in Germany we have, it's almost an H shape, funnily. We have a hydrogen grid in or the possibility to build up a hydrogen grid in the west and one in the east, and we have a lot of industrial players in the middle that you could connect. Salzgitter is one example. And you have underground storages on both sides. So, and actually a lot of renewables in the north of Germany and a lot of renewables in the eastern part of Germany. So there are a lot of nice things coming together on the infrastructure side, and a big need to store the excess wind power that we have at many times during the year, and hydrogen is perfect for that.
Axel, as a former CEO of a hydrogen of a natural gas storage company, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean we are preparing to convert our assets into hydrogen storage, and actually in Europe we are blessed with storage. Therefore, question number one, that's clearly an opportunity for us to store excess renewables. However, that alone is not enough, yeah? So to justify the investment into the hydrogen business, also the capex for electrolyzer, balance of plants, etc., I mean, we need more than just the excess renewables. We also need some, if you call it dedicated, renewables, clearly. Nevertheless, I think we have all these storage assets, and we should make use of them. And in particular, salt caverns in northwest Germany, northwest Europe are perfectly suited to also store 100% hydrogen. To the second question you asked me about that, actually I believe in waves, and that's what we also hear from our customers, that the first wave of hydrogen will clearly go into the industry, refinery, steel business, etc., and then some more transportation and power business will follow. So that's, for me, clearly the priority. Nevertheless, I think we should be technologically neutral and open, and also for the heating and building business, shouldn't exclude it. I'm sure there are some regions in Germany and in Europe where it makes lots of sense to use hydrogen also as heating. So therefore, I believe we should avoid any some more dogmatic, simple solutions. That's the only option. So we should remain open. However, the heating business will not be the first wave to use hydrogen.
Perfect. In order to kickstart the final round, we're in the last 5 minutes, I would like to ask for the second poll that we have prepared, which should give us some insights into the outlook. So the second poll, please. There we go. We have talked quite a bit about what have we achieved so far, what's in the pipeline, and now, of course, we should look forward. What is your outlook on the hydrogen economy in the next 3 years? As I said, many projects are on the starting grid. Will they get off the blocks? And we see a lot of optimism. That's important. for developing and growing business. I would like to see more very optimistic persons. We have, hopefully, some here on the panel. So to conclude, let's start with Nils. A very short answer. We're in the last minutes here. What is your outlook for your personal business, but for the economy?
I think this is the biggest opportunity in cleantech right now, or amongst probably the top 1-2 opportunities in this industry. And I'm very optimistic because I think too many people in all areas, from the suppliers to the demand side to the political side, have committed to turn this into a reality. And we as a whole in Europe would look pretty stupid if we wouldn't be able to get this started relatively quickly. So I believe I'm definitely between optimistic and very optimistic that we'll see the exponential growth phase and the development of a handful of globally leading companies in the coming 3 years.
Philip?
Yeah, I will probably answer in a very strange way on this because a couple of years
You're pessimistic, no.
No, a couple of years ago I was becoming very cynical.
Yeah.
And back then I had the conviction that climate change was not going to be enough as a motivator for things to change. And I was convinced that we needed to have a war to move things forward. Unfortunately, fortunately, I don't know how to answer that. We have a war and things are moving forward. And now I have to say I'm optimistic.
But
so it's a very strange answer.
You need to explain. How is the war becoming a catalyst for hydrogen? We see a lot of gas discussions, of natural gas discussions in Europe, but how does hydrogen come into play here?
It's a geopolitical motivation, and I think that still is apparently with policymakers much more stronger, and I think also with the broader public than climate change as a motivator. And I think sort of a wartime economics. We have seen it in the Second World War II and the First World War also. You can change an economic infrastructure from producing mundane, everyday stuff towards a wartime economy and producing things that you need at that moment, meaning electrolyzers, etc. So I think we are moving in that direction. That's why, unfortunately, I have to say I'm optimistic now.
Okay. Anna, what is driving your optimism, which I hope is there?
Yeah, that's correct. I'm optimistic, and I think you said it on your introductory statement that there were hype moments in the past on hydrogen. They all were short-lived because their motivation was more of a conjuncture. And this time, the motivation is truly fundamental. Although we have, of course, catalysts like the war and concerns about security of supply, I believe that achieving carbon neutrality is a fundamental motivation, and we cannot miss this tremendous opportunity to actually make sure we do it in an efficient way. And by that, we need to promote informed discussions with policymakers, with industrial players, and all stakeholders. We really need to make sure that discussions are informed and that they are motivated by sound and robust motivations.
Axel, why will 2023 become the year of hydrogen?
I think 2023 is an important year because we have all the ingredients in place, so we can make it happen. What is needed is more pragmatism, also in private-public partnership. So I think the time of announcements and of strategy papers and an even higher political ambition, this is over. We need this pragmatism somehow to get now traction on the ground. But I'm very optimistic that all the relevant stakeholders have understood this and are now ready to move on. So therefore, I'm very optimistic for this year and next years to come.
Perfect. Thank you.